All right, now we're going to go to social studies, and the Pilgrims have landed, and they are being helped by an Indian named Samoset, and Samoset was sent to them by their chief, and he spoke English. And the reason why he spoke English was that he had learned from fishermen along the coast. Remember, this was over 100 years later after Columbus discovered San Salvador. So people were now exploring, and especially the northern waters, which were filled with fish. And Samoset was able to learn English, and he walked into the village, and he promised them that he would bring his chief and he would bring his friend Squanto to visit with them. Now, if you remember, they had written a peace treaty with Chief Massasoit, who was the head of the Woodland tribe in that area. And the treaty was made so that there would be peace among these people, that they would not hurt each other, that if anybody did hurt either the Indian or the pilgrim, that they would be punished and they would do no wrong. And when they came into the settlement, they wouldn't bring any of their bows and arrows, that they would come in peace, and that they would help them. Now, we find that that first winter was very, very hard on them, because they did not have a chance to grow crops, because they came in the fall, and the winter was very cold, especially in that area of Massachusetts. You get a lot of cold winds. So Squanto came, and he taught them many, many things. If you turn to page 158 and read, it says, Squanto lived with the Pilgrims in Plymouth. He taught the Pilgrims how to hunt and fish. He showed them how to plant corn, beans, and squash in a hill of dirt. He taught them to bury a fish with the seeds to help the plants grow. Squanto became a friend to the Pilgrims, and here you see a picture of him planting the corn. And they wanted to know when was a good time to plant. And he said, when the oak tree's leaves are the size of a mouse's ear. Now, a mouse's ear is kind of small, but that's the time in the spring when you need to plant the corn, because corn was new to them. They had never had corn before. Corn was brought over to Europe because of the Indians planting it and using it as a base of their food all the way from North America, and you know, in South America, corn is very, very popular. The empanadas and the tamales and the tacos and all, the corn is the basic food of the Indian tribes. Okay? So the culture was different, the food was different, but it was food that they needed in order to survive. And let's look at page 159. And I'm going to read to you how the planting is done. And tomorrow I'll probably show you in a poster. The first thing, when the oak leaf is as big as a mouse's ear, begin planting. You place a small fish in the bottom of a mound of dirt, and you place the corn seed onto the mound and wait for the corn to sprout. Plant the beans under the corn sprouts, and then the corn becomes the pole for the beans and the vines of the beans to climb. Then it says, Squanto taught them to plant the squash on the side of the dirt mound, and the squash will help to stop the weeds from growing, and it keeps the ground wet or moist. And it says wait for, and then the seeds will grow. So that is what Squanto told them. All right, now let me read a little bit about who Squanto is, and then you could read it on page 159. Okay, who is this Squanto? Governor William Bradford said that Squanto was a special instrument sent of God for their good beyond their expectation. They never expected to have such a wonderful, wonderful person to help them and teach them. God's wisdom had sent Squanto to his new home and helped the Pilgrims survive in the New World. Now, Squanto had lived in that area. He had lived in the woodland home and had been kidnapped by the English in 1614. He lived in Europe for a time as a slave to Spanish monks. A monk is like a priest, but in Spain. So he also spent time in England, and an English explorer took him to New England, where he was taken in by Massasoit. Again, in God's wisdom, Squanto learned the English language and their culture. Now, when he returned home, he had no family. While he had been away, his tribe had died from disease. The Pilgrims had now settled on the land where he had grown up. And he embraced the Pilgrims, and they welcomed him because this was where he had grown up and it was home to him. And now there were a new group of people here who seemed to be very kind. At his death, Squanto requested prayer from William Bradford and gave everything he had to the English to remember him. And Bradford felt a great loss when Squanto passed away. Okay, so you would read this passage to show how God knew that the Pilgrims would need Squanto and how he learned English, even though he had suffered a little bit because he lost his family and he was taken prisoner. He was sold as a slave, but then he came back and he learned about Jesus. And he was able to help the Pilgrims survive. Okay, so you read page 159, a little biography of Squanto.